Welcome everyone. My name is Diedrich Martin, Superintendent for Caledonia Community Schools. And tonight we are doing another town hall community meeting. And quickly, you can see the agenda. We have an invited guest, Ms. Joanne Hogenson from the Kent County Health Department. She's going to speak to us first. And then we will go through the executive order and its impact on schools, our school reentry plan, our school reentry survey results that we got back from our parents, our return to learn plan, financial updates regarding COVID-19 and what it means for athletics, a brief bond update, as well as information about an upcoming equity committee. With that being said, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Ms. Joanne Hogenson. Again, she is the Director of Community Wellness for the Kent County Health Department. She is one of the people that we contact to help us when we have specific or challenging questions regarding COVID-19 and keeping all of our students and staff safe.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm just privileged to be here with you in Caledonia. I'm especially
Joanne, you should be able to speak now.
Okay. Have I been unmuted? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, that's good. I think I'm being heard. Is that right? Yeah, okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you tonight, and I'm especially happy for Caledonia because I have a wonderful daughter, her husband, and 5 kids that live in Caledonia and go to Caledonia schools. So my heart is really with you there, and I've been so impressed with the education that my grandkids are getting in Caledonia. So congratulations to you. I just want to take a few minutes and give a quick update about COVID-19 and specifically how it might impact as schools start up in the fall. COVID-19, as you know, is a pandemic that has hit West Michigan and particularly the city of Grand Rapids very hard. And initially, back in March, April, and into May, we were seeing very large numbers of COVID cases in a very small demographic group. We were seeing them principally, the transmission was occurring in factories, particularly in those factories where there was meat packing and places where essential workers had to go to work. And then those workers were taking it home, and we were seeing a lot of transmission of the virus among family members. Whole families, 8, 10, sometimes 12 people were getting sick from COVID-19. And then we were also seeing it and people that commuted together. So a lot of people, when we would do the contact tracing and find out how did they get sick, we were finding out that they got sick because they were driving to and from work every day with someone that was COVID-19 positive. In the last 3 weeks, we have seen a very significant shift in who's getting sick. Right now, the people that are most getting sick are younger people. The mean age of people that are getting ill is much lower. The good thing is they tend to do better. People in nursing homes that get sick, it often leads to fatality. They often die because of their illness. But people who are younger, they often fare very well, but they often make other people sick because of their unwillingness or inability to social distance. And so if I have a message here for you today, it's for you, for your families, for your children. Please maintain distance between you and other individuals. You don't know who has COVID-19. There's no way to tell unless they're exhibiting symptoms. And it's a very infectious virus. It passes quickly and easily among people. So the recommendations that I can give are the ones that you're hearing all the time. Try to social distance between you and other people, and whenever possible, wear a mask. The mask protects you, the mask protects the people around you, and if 2 people are are 6 feet apart and both are wearing masks, the likelihood of transmission of the virus is very, very low. The people that we are seeing that are getting sick from COVID-19 are people that have disregarded the orientation and are not social distancing and not wearing masks, and then they're getting sick. So that's a message I want to emphasize for everyone. Now I want to spend a few seconds talking about, so what happens if you do get COVID-19? And I have a picture here, and this is a graphic that might help you to see. And I think there are some surprises because I don't think everyone recognizes what are the implications if someone in your house gets COVID-19. So far to the left, you'll see a box that says, stay home. Underneath of that, where there's a little house, it says the sick household member that tests positive should begin isolation at home. So this could be the father, a mother, it could be any household member, it could be one of the children, and one person tests positive, has symptoms or doesn't have symptoms, but they get a positive test. That person then must stay home in isolation for 10 days. So at least 10 days since symptoms first appeared, and 72 hours fever-free, that means without a fever-reducing medication, and other symptoms are showing improvement. So the cough might not be completely gone, the headache might not be completely gone, but the person is getting better and has been 10 days since the onset of symptoms and 72 hours fever-free. At that point, if that's a student, at that point, the student can then go back to school. However, everyone that lived with that student, everyone in the house, that they had to be in quarantine for the entire time that the student was in isolation. So if one person in the house was homesick for 10 days, everybody else in the house is supposed to quarantine that entire time. The transmission of the virus can happen anytime during those 10 days, including on the very last day. So at the end of the 10 days, the person who was sick with COVID-19 can go back to school or can go back to work, but everyone else now has to quarantine for 14 more days. So if you do the math, that will mean that people that are household partners, they share a home with someone that had COVID-19 is going to have to quarantine for 24 days, 10 days during the illness and then 14 days after that. Now to make it even a little bit more tricky, if a second person gets ill in the house at any time during that time, the count starts all over again. So if child A gets sick on July 1st, the family then would not be out of quarantine until July 24th. But if child B gets sick on July 10th, the whole count starts all over again. And so now we're into August before the quarantine is over. So it is a very long time, and it's a reason that we really want to try to prevent the spread of the virus, because for many reasons, including economic reasons, this is a real hardship on families. So as much as possible, children should be tested whenever they have symptoms. Really, the quicker the diagnosis comes, the quicker people can get on with their lives and return to work or school. So that was one thing that I wanted to explain. The next thing, there's a question of whose responsibility is it to inform others? Well, normally, nobody, not your healthcare professional, not the health department, not the school, would ever announce that somebody is sick. They wouldn't send out an email saying someone is ill. But this is a different situation because it is so contagious. And so we are allowed to, in fact, required to let people know when they have been exposed to COVID-19. So If there were a case of COVID-19 in your child's classroom, and the child was in the classroom during the time that that child was contagious, the rest of the classroom would, anyone that was within 6 feet of the sick child for 15 minutes or more without a mask, that person would have to be quarantined as well. So if one child is sick in the classroom and is in contact during the school day, and school days certainly last longer than 15 minutes, it is possible that the entire classroom might have to quarantine. So in that case, the child who is sick would have to go home and be in isolation to recuperate from the illness. And the other children that were exposed would have to be in quarantine for 14 days. I noticed there was a question about HIPAA. And the question is HIPAA doesn't stand during this time, it doesn't apply to COVID-19. And the answer is actually, because this is a pandemic and a public health crisis, the public health code requires us to inform people of possible exposures. So we do our best to limit the information that we give to only that which is absolutely necessary for families to protect themselves. So the school would probably send out a notification to the families to say that there was an individual in such and such a classroom that was diagnosed with COVID-19, what the date was, and that the family then is required to quarantine the children that were exposed in the classroom. We would not give the child's name, and we would not encourage any sort of reverse identification where you can kind of figure it out. Who was it that spread the virus in the classroom? And then other people would then be required, not required, but encouraged to get tested. Another question is that true for teachers and other? It's true for everybody. So if the teacher would also have to quarantine if the teacher had a exposure. And again, I want to tell you what an exposure is. An exposure is being within 6 feet of the individual for 15 minutes or more without an N95 mask. The cloth mask and the disposable surgical mask are very helpful, but they do not cancel out the need for quarantine. Only an N95 mask like are used in hospitals. So that is all I have prepared to talk about. I would be willing to take questions now. There's a question about children that cannot wear masks. Absolutely. Children that cannot wear masks should not be discriminated against for any reason. In fact, children under the age of 12 are generally not encouraged to wear masks. Masks on younger children tend to cause more transference of virus than they help because kids share masks. They drop the masks on the floor. Little kids will suck on the mask. They'll play with the mask. They'll do everything with the mask other than protect themselves from the virus. So the guidance that is coming from the state does not encourage small children to use masks. If a parent wants their child to wear a mask in school, they would have to communicate that with the school. Children under 6th grade will not be required to wear masks. Question about, is there any data on those who recover? The average length of illness for otherwise healthy people is 10 days. So people are generally recovering very relatively quickly, 10 days. If there is an underlying health problem, they tend to have more complications. And there's a common situation where people develop pneumonia after having COVID-19, and they have a much longer recuperation. Children tend to fare very, very well. Their symptoms are very light, and sometimes they just think they have a little cold or a headache.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. I apologize. For some reason, my mute wouldn't, it kept me muted. I know we have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, what I'm going to ask is that we hold some of the questions to the end. Some of them we'll be able to answer in the course of the presentation. And then if we're not able to answer, if Ms. Hogeson is still on, she can certainly do that. But if not, we can always provide the information for our community to contact the Kent County Health Department for some specific questions. But just know between tonight and between the start of school year, you will continue to receive more information about what to expect when we return to school in August. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward with the rest of our presentation because we have a lot of agenda topics to cover, and I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions on a variety of issues. First, I want to speak about the executive order that came out last week. And so I think what's important for people to understand is that the executive order really dictates the term of when and where schools can reopen. And the school district, local officials, we determine how, in what fashion and what mode, based on what we are allowed to do under the executive order. With that, you probably heard the governor talk about the Michigan Safe Start plan, and there's various phases in this plan. And it basically goes phase 1 through 6, with 1 through 3 being very similar in that the COVID-19 is wreaking a lot of havoc and is causing us to be in a required shutdown mode, and 5 through 6 with different levels of what schools could look like. So I'm going to move to where we are in our COVID-19. So based on the most recent information that we have acquired, phase 1 through 3 means that schools are not able to open for in-person instruction, remote or distance learning only, and this includes the suspension of all athletics. As of recently, we have been identified in phase 4, but we are in kind of phase 4 with a warning that if you have paid attention to some of the information, the rate of COVID-19 cases are going up in Kent County, and so we certainly don't want to see that escalate, and we are encouraging and doing our part to remind everyone to wear a mask and social distance as much as possible, because at phase 4, 5, and 6, we are able to have in-person instruction. And again, we are in phase 4 as of yesterday. We want, and our desire and our hope is to start school in the fall with in-person instruction. Phase 5 is very similar to phase 4, except there are some requirements in phase 4 that I'm going to get into. In phase 5, some of these things are more moderate, meaning that they're not required, but they're strongly recommended. And then phase 6, we are in a very minimal phase, and a lot of the things they still recommend that we do, but it's not as critical. So let's go over some of the basic requirements that start with phase 4. Again, phase 4 is when we are able to return to school. We are currently in phase 4 with a warning that the rates are going up. In phase 4, all students in grades 6 through 12 are required to wear a mask. In the common areas, all students pre-K through 12 would be required to wear a mask. So this is when students are passing in the hallways. This is when they are in a common area such as a library. or in the cafeteria. Obviously, it is okay for students to take off a mask for purposes of eating, but when we are in large areas under phase 4, masks are required in the common areas for all students and all staff, and in the classroom for all students and all staff. On the buses, all students and all staff, pre-K through 12, will be required to wear a mask, and we will also be required to make sure that hand sanitizer is available for students as they enter the bus. Schools must cooperate with our local health department screening protocols for staff and students, and if we do have a confirmed case, there's a process to which they will be identified, and we will share that information. I know the question has come up about HIPAA rights. We as a school district have already dealt with a few cases of COVID or people who have been exposed to COVID. For those who we know of who have been in contact with that individual, we have sent communication to that family and those individuals around. We do it in a fashion to not call out an individual student's name. So we are doing everything we can to still be in compliance with HIPAA, but do understand that we won't make a broadcast to everyone whenever we have someone who has come in contact with someone with COVID. Indoor assemblies, large gatherings will be prohibited. Outdoor events will be limited to 100 people or less with social distancing. And we must comply with all Michigan high school athletic guidance, which is another list of things in itself. So again, this is a multiple page document, but what I wanted to do is break down maybe the top things that people need to know, and please don't panic. You will continue to get more information as we get closer to the start of school. And we hope that we, between now and August, we can move from phase 4 to phase 5, but that would require everyone to do their part and to practice social distance and wearing a mask. Next, we have some, I want to give a quick overview for the school survey reentry results, and we will make a more comprehensive, put the results on our district website in the upcoming days. But I want to kind of speak to the highlights of a voluminous report. Essentially, what we saw in terms of safety, overwhelmingly, people identified that the safest way for us to conduct school is in an online fashion. That was clear and by far. We saw that the majority of the people felt extremely confident or very confident that distance learning will keep families and students safe in terms of exposure to COVID. Consequently, they saw in-person as not as safe. So when you look at that, we had less than half of the people who took the survey felt that in-person return to school will keep students and families safe from COVID. So it was less than 50% who felt confident in that. But at the same time, when the question was posed about educational quality, you can see overwhelmingly about 75% of the respondents felt that educational quality is best in an in-person fashion, while everyone acknowledged that distance learning is the safest. As it relates to confidence in the quality of distance learning, that did not rank as high. It was very low counts of people who felt very confident or extremely confident that distance learning provided the same quality of education as face-to-face in-person learning. So again, and when you look at the summary, overwhelmingly, Caledonia parents prefer to be in person to ensure the instructional quality, but they believe strongly that the greatest way to provide safety is through distance learning. In recognition of this, we have focused our attention and energy working towards two things. One is in-person instruction, if allowed. And again, that is if we're in phase 4 or higher, which we are currently in phase 4. And in phase 4, there are certain things that are required. So this is not something that as a school district, we can say, oh, we don't feel like doing this. The executive order does require certain things for the safety of all students and staff. And so we'll have to adhere to those safety requirements in phase 4. Those safety requirements are reduced in phase 5 and 6, as you saw previously. The other thing is online instruction for those who prefer. I've heard from many families on both sides of the issue because we realize that we have staff members and we have students, and we have students who have family members in their home who have compromised health situations. And so we realize that there's a group of families who would prefer online instruction. And so with that being the case, we have been preparing to improve on our online instruction opportunities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kristen Flynn. She is our Executive Director of Student Achievement. She's going to speak to our Return to Learn roadmap and some of the big pieces of what you need to know moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Well, there are certainly many things that we still do not know for sure. We have really been contingency planning on all of the what ifs, especially when we think about pivoting learning at any point in the year since we started the distance learning in the spring. So while our focus has really been on the plans coming back to school face-to-face, we are looking at intentional, rigorous ways to enhance student learning through technology. And not only will that help us strengthen our face-to-face learning, but it'll also allow us to look at what we've done in the spring and what we've learned from distance learning and pivot more thoughtfully with each student's needs in mind. So the first thing we plan to do this is address this more quickly with moving our strategic plan, one of our areas for our strategic plan next year, up to this year. And that is transitioning from trimesters to semesters a year early, which would be starting this fall. Next slide, please. So aside from being able to go in depth with subject areas, we are also going to be able to adjust to an online or blended learning situation much more quickly and allow for more time to address those areas as we're pivoting potentially to from face-to-face to an online situation. It's also going to allow us to extend learning and also provide intervention with more time versus when you think about a 12-week trimester versus an 18-week semester. It is also better aligned for programming that is current and what we anticipate in the future to expand offerings in Caledonia, so aligned with dual enrollment, county programs, career and technical education, and advanced placement courses. In addition, next slide please, we are hoping then to be able to also add course offerings that would be aligned to a semester schedule in our AP testing. So an examples would be advanced placement psychology or macroeconomics. There would be less transition for students as well, transitioning from 2 semesters to 3. And again, that would be an important point if we end up, distance learning at some point in the year. Moving to a semester also aligns with approximately 80% of the county and region who are on semesters and aligned in that way. And while this is a budgetary savings in staffing, we are hoping that through attrition, wherever possible, that we would be able to reduce costs that way in light of our budget and financial implications because of COVID, and those will be talked about later here in the presentation. Next slide, please. And also, if you have a student at the high school, you should have already received communication and from the principal and counselors. And if you have any additional questions regarding your student's schedule or how that might change, please contact your student's counselor. In terms of our entire district's Return to Learn plan, the focus has been on ensuring that every student is on track for their individualized pathway to success. And what we mean by that is we know that there could be some gaps from this past spring. We want to avoid any more of those that could happen if we were to let's say, start school face-to-face and 4 weeks in, be asked to be home for 3 weeks or 2 weeks or a month. But we really want to, what we've really been focusing on are not just the academic, but social and emotional needs of students too, and that anybody that may have gotten off track, that we would be back on track by the end of the 21-22 school year, if not sooner, of course. Next slide, please. So we have had this return to learn work groups, which has included our building administrators, our executive director of transportation and operations, food services director, technology director, and teachers. In the fall, we are looking at all of these areas. So aside from assessing what I just mentioned, student learning progress and loss, how do we move students forward more quickly? How do we address learning gaps? But also just thinking about how do we assess students if we had to be online? How do we deal with issues related to trauma and social emotional learning of students who may have been out of school and had special needs that need to be addressed more thoroughly if we had to pivot from face-to-face to online? We also want to think about the professional learning for teachers. And so much of the training that we did, and I want to say I'm super proud of the pivot we made despite the very short amount of time, which was literally about 4 days to pivot and move our teachers and then get them training over the course of a couple weeks. And it was incredibly amazing at how quickly that happened. We want to improve upon that. And just like our parent survey, we also surveyed our teachers and asked what do they need. And professional learning, again, with more of the focus of not just distance learning and doing remote pandemic learning, but really learning how to address online and what online and blended learning tools and systems are and what the research and best practices are around the nation in these areas. And so we will be doing training with teachers that it will be coming up this summer. It's already going to be starting. Information is actually going to be going out this week for some of that. But in the fall, we also hope to be forming an advisory group of students, staff, parents, community members who will also help us take a critical look at how we can positively contribute to improving upon and creating an inclusive school community that is safe and respectful for all students and staff, and how to help students work collaboratively across an ever-increasing diverse world. So more information will be coming out about that. Next slide. So these next 2 slides are an overview of the really 2 models that we're focusing on for the fall. This one is called a face-to-face blended model, and this would be where students are coming back. And right now, as Dr. Martin stated, we would be coming back face-to-face. We would be using technology then during instruction. So an example of that might be teachers in the classroom. They might be working with a small group of students. There could be another group of students working on an activity in the classroom, and maybe a third group of students could be within Google Classroom for pre-K-8 or within Brightspace for 9-12, and they might be doing something within the learning management system. I think we have a really amazing opportunity with what we learned this spring of the things that we wished we had taught students before we actually had to move online, and parents for that matter. How can we help better support students and parents as we transition? So it would be a chance for us to set, reset, and use technology, but then we would also have the ability then to move fully online. So we would have those systems and understood, pivot points for parents and families to understand if needed. In terms of technology, we have already addressed the issue of deploying large numbers of technology in the way that we did, which may have looked seamless for some of you picking it up, but on the back end was pretty crazy to start. So we are looking at a one-to-one bring your own device opportunity at the high school and or a Chromebook checkout for 9-12. And then we are also going to have access and availability of Chromebooks in classrooms pre-K-8 that are assigned to students and available. And then we also, what we'll do is have those plans worked out within the building. So if we, let's say, got notice on a Friday that we were not coming back on a Monday, that we would have a way to deploy those to students that would need them K-8, so that we wouldn't have the need for parents and families to have to, find time to come and line up and pick up Chromebooks and schedule times and things like that. So I'm really, and hotspots would also be, we need to address that as well. Yes, we would be addressing those. So this obviously face-to-face courses that we're calling face-to-face blended would be taught by our Caledonia teachers, pre-K-12. The other option, which we've already gotten some requests for, is a fully online option. And we know that we already have health compromised families and situations where maybe people just do not feel comfortable bringing their children back to school or sending them back to school. This would be a fully online option for pre-K-8 using Google Classroom. I'm sorry, using, I think it's actually called Buzz is the one for fully online. And then Brightspace would be for 9-12. So what this would look like is that there would be a fully online option for 9-12 students to be able to take some or all classes online. These would be taught by Caledonia teachers at the high school. The K-8 online courses would be courses that we would partner with a learning partner who has been doing online learning for quite some time. Those decisions are being narrowed right now as we speak. Those have been vetted by the administrative team and others that have been looking at options. And this would really allow more of a personalized instruction, self-pacing, monitoring of student task on time, or student time on task, and task completion. So this is going to be a much more robust experience, and this would be a fully online option where students would have the opportunity to take the four core courses online and 2 elective options. So more information will be coming out about that. That is just getting solidified. Again, we talked about technology. It's the same for this particular scenario. The one difference in this scenario is that we have K-8 teachers this first year. It would be taught by our learning partner teachers who, again, all of the partners that we're looking at have been doing this for quite some time with success. And those learning partner teachers would be teaching for this fall with the goal of, at the K-8 level, moving teachers that would be interested and based on the demand of our families to being able to teach online. We felt this summer that with all of the other curricular changes and our new math curriculum and helping our teachers learn the tools that they need for technology, that the administrative team felt it was too much at the K-8 level to make that happen for this year, but we're looking long term, and we see value in, again, if there's a need for our own teachers to be able to teach that. So that's really the 2 scenarios, and again, I see questions coming in. I know we're going to have time at the end, Dr. Martin, to address those, and so I'll look at the questions while you're doing the next slide.
Thank you very much, Kristen. And again, we will try to move through some of these so we can leave time for questions and answers. We know they're coming in. A quick financial update. We unfortunately had to pass our budget several days before the governor informed us what the 1920 budget would be, and there's still a lot of questions about the fall 2021 budget. But in a positive note, we were told to prepare for a $650 proration or a reduction to the budget for the end of the school year, which would have had to come almost completely out of our fund balance. They were able to get some relief in terms of the flexibility from some federal stimulus money. They also were able to use some of the money to cover the school aid fund shortfall from the general fund for the state. So what that meant is the reduction shifted from a negative $650 to a negative $175 per student. We also put some things in place to try to save as much money as we could, because all of the educational financial professionals are saying that expect not a 1 year, but a 2, possibly a 3-year impact to the finances. So we were able to save about about $1 million, about $1 million to our fund balance. We set a goal of $500,000. We reached $1 million. There's about $60 million that are still in question in terms of additional reductions from district categorical funds. So these are some of the special fund categories for at-risk populations, maybe ESL. So even though for the school district, our fiscal year ended June 30th, there is still questions to be ironed out about the final details of the 1920 budget. Whatever it is, we should be better than originally projected, but the big concern you see in yellow is that they're still telling us that while they were able to get some grace from some of the federal spending requirements, and they were able to take some money from the general fund, there is a projected budget shortfall of about $650 per student. For those who want to quickly do the math, that's about 3.3 million for a district our size that we will see a reduction in funding for this coming fall. With that, we have already put some things in place to try to deal with this 3.3 million shortfall. We have eliminated or chose not to fill some positions that were previously approved in the budget, and we had started to move forward prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so you can see 2 administrative positions have been reduced or eliminated. Also, we reduced all departmental budgets from athletics to the superintendent's office to every department in our district will receive at least a 15% reduction in their building or discretionary spending. We've been able to reduce our technology budget by about $126,000. We've been able to transfer some money for replacement of devices through the bond. So we were very fortunate that our community blessed us with the bond funds, but they're very limited on what we could use to spend that on. So we looked at every aspect of the law and see how could we best use that money to help us through this crisis in the upcoming year. We are reducing our bus purchases, so we did that in the 1920 budget, and we saved about $100,000 there. So that was part of the $1 million savings that you saw. We were scheduled to replace some buses. We're going to have to make them work a little bit longer. We're reducing our bus purchases for next year. We're also reducing operations budget by the tune of about $100,000. Additionally, I reached out, or my administrative team, we reached out to all bargaining groups, and we asked everyone. We had several groups who were either in the process of negotiating a new contract or had already agreed to a contract and had raises promised to them. So that was baked into our original budget. So our shortfall was actually, under COVID-19, our shortfall would be higher actually than the $3 million that I mentioned. When you look at all of the increases, the increased staffing positions, the raises or the increases. So all of our administrators agreed to do a pay freeze, all of our support staff. So that would be your secretaries, your instructional aides agreed to a pay freeze, all of the central office support, all of the maintenance and operations and technology staff. In addition to that, myself and my most senior administrators have agreed to a 2% pay reduction to deal with this financial shortfall. In light of that, all of those things and some positions that we haven't filled or will not fill, that has got us to about $1.3 million of our goal. We still need to get to about $3 million in savings. And so what we are going to have to do is we're going to have to make some reductions to our staffing. And while that's never a fun or ideal thing to do, the reality is about 85% or more of every single dollar that comes into the school district really goes into someone's salary or benefits, because we are a people person. We are a people business. Our number one commodity is people serving and helping other people. So with that, by the end of this week, we will be notifying somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 or more staff members about layoffs. These are considered early warning notifications. and it will happen before July 15th with a final confirmation of those who will be laid off by July 30th. Or sooner, and that will be up to, we're anticipating about 26 staff members who will unfortunately probably be laid off so that we can achieve our $3 million goal. We are in a pretty good shape as a district in terms of financially, and we have developed a process to methodically spend down our fiscal reserves over a 3-year period. So all of this also assumes that we will be spending about $2 million into our fund balance over the next couple years. So as you can see, we have a pretty tall order, and so we are constantly working every day. This is anything other than the normal summer, but we will be moving forward and doing the best we can to try to minimize the negative impact to students. But as we talked about shifting to a trimester, or from a trimester to a semester, there is some academic benefit that allow us to keep sound quality programming for students, knowing that we're going to have to operate with less staffing. Athletics. At this point, there are some things that are more so unique to the athletic program in light of COVID-19 and being in phase 4. Athletics, no different than everything else. If you are in phase 5 or 6, there are less restrictions. But in phase 4, which we're currently in, we're preparing for athletics in the fall. And I'm going to ask Mr. Kingsbury if he can speak briefly to some of the higher level changes that we know about in the athletic department. And we do realize that a big decision will be made coming soon as it pertains to possibly flip-flopping sports. So Mr. Kingsbury, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. As Dr. Martin mentioned, right now, phases 1 through 3, no athletics will take place. Fortunately, we are in phase 4. And currently our fall student athletes are participating in voluntary strength and conditioning training. And of course, we're practicing those social distancing protocols and other safety protocols in order to keep our student athletes safe per MHSAA guidelines. Michigan State Safe Start Plan dictates how athletics look in the fall. As we mentioned, in phase 4 and above, we are allowed to hold athletic competitions, but there are some strict guidelines with spectators when it comes to that. So there'll be a limited number of fans at the stadiums. There will be required social distancing, and there will be the requirement of wearing masks during that. So, and the one caveat that Dr. Martin mentioned is the MHSAA, the Michigan High School Athletic Association, which is the governing body for sports at high schools in Michigan, is considering doing a swap of fall sports to the spring and the spring to the fall, just because those respective sports they're more prone to having a natural social distance to that. So we are looking for that answer on July 20th, and we're hoping we'll have that and be able to effectively plan for sports in the fall. That is a big part of our learning for our kids. And I really encourage you to look at our CHS High School Athletics webpage. They have a great wealth of information, or reach out to our athletic department if you have specific questions about athletics. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kingsbury. And again, I'm going to double down. I encourage you to look at the guidelines. It's much longer than what you see, but there's a lot of things that are put in place that are required for the protection and the safety of our students, as well as our coaches. We have had a few incidents where someone has been in contact with someone in COVID, and so we have worked on the quarantine procedures. Again, this is not something we're going to send out to everyone. We want to try to do it in a private, respectable fashion, recognizing the HIPAA requirements. But again, make yourself familiar with that if you are a student athlete or a parent of a student athlete. I want to briefly speak to our bond. That's another thing that we have been working pretty heavily on over the course of every week, actually. We have a bond team meeting, and we also have a bond webpage that is already up and active. We have frequently asked questions on there. So please take an opportunity to visit the FAQ. As information or questions come in, we will continue to update that information, but look forward to regular postings and updates so that we can keep our community up to date of what's going on. As it relates to the bond, there are 19, we had about 19 total RFP, or requests for proposals, for architects and engineers. That's one of the first steps that we need to solidify as part of the process. And so we held our interviews last week, July 1st. Recommendations will be going to the Board of Education. We broke that up into 2 tiers, one to focus on the Calplex Community Center piece of the bond, and the others to focus on the school needs, knowing that we have a number of things that we need to get in place for the fall of 21-22 as we transition to a K-4, 5, 6, 7, 8 environment. And so the first phase of getting the architects in place, that's underway. And as we get into the fall, you'll start to see more information regarding timelines which are being developed about what the process will look like over the upcoming 5 years. The RFP for the construction management services is currently out for review, and we're expecting proposals to come on July 17th. And so then we will look at those proposals and figure out the interview process for that. Again, you will be able to find some additional information on the bond page, which is on our website, and we're going to keep that up to date. Next, I want to speak to a letter that I put out previously regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion in our school community. And so what we're looking at is we are looking to engage the conversation and the training necessary for staff in how to understand and deal with issues of bias, culture, and race. And this is going to involve us having a diverse committee to meet the requests of our students, our staff, and our community. This was originally a part of our strategic plan, and actually there was a couple teachers who came, and I encouraged their honesty, and I won't call these gentlemen out, but they essentially said, you know, we have some issues going on with some of our students and some of our families, and quite honestly, we don't feel that we're adequately prepared to have discussions to address some of the concerns that our students are dealing with. And they asked me, would you consider moving up some of the training and some of the work that we should do regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. This was actually all before COVID-19. It was before the protests that we're seeing all across the country. Follow that up, and that followed myself having the opportunity through the strategic planning process and hearing directly from students at the high school level who talked to me, as well as some board members, and who are identifying a number of concerns. And these concerns were not just race. It dealt with gender. It dealt with religion. It dealt with gender identity. It dealt with cultural issues. And so as we heard from our students, and then we heard from our staff, and fast forward to what's going on across the country, we felt like while we wanted to have started working on this in the fall of 21, we must meet the demand of our students and our staff, because to ignore the issues of bias and what it brings would really be us being derelict on our duty to get our kids prepared to be able to function appropriately in a multicultural environment. And we realized, and we were very intentional when we talked about looking at bias training, we're not talking about just the issue of black and white. We're talking about the issue of, I've heard from families and students who feel sometimes uncomfortable about issues of religion in our community, or issues of gender in our school community, or issues of race in our school community. And so, or issues of maybe being teased because of physical disabilities or mental disabilities. Regardless of what it is, we want to educate our students, citizens, to be the next leaders of the world. And to do that, you have to have a healthier respect and understanding of your own bias and what you bring to the table and how that might impact others. So we are looking for participants. I want to thank some of the families who've already reached out to me, as well as some of the staff members. Again, when we get into the fall, we will start to develop that advisory committee. But as we are looking at that, some of the things that stood out to us as a district, when you look at the Society for Human Resource Management, they define diversity as a collective of mixture of differences and similarities that include individual and organizational characteristics, values, beliefs, experiences, backgrounds, preferences, and behaviors. So if you look at this visual, obviously there are some things that we can see on the surface level, just like on this iceberg. And we may have some type of bias there. And I challenge people when they say, well, you know, I'm culturally aware, I don't have a bias. I'm thinking if you don't have a bias, you're probably not more than 1 year old, because it is natural for us to have some type of thought or opinion based on a previous experience, positive or negative, or something that we saw on TV. And sometimes they are informed, sometimes they're not as informed as we think. But under the surface, there are diversity issues of religion, military experience, where you live, or what country you come from, or the beliefs and the values that you have, or your marital status, or whether you are your ethnic background, your socioeconomic status. So in recognizing that, we want to take a broad view. We want to give our teachers the tools that they need to be successful and meet the needs of our students. And more importantly, we want to speak to the voice and give voice to the students who spoke about these very issues to me in a very eloquent fashion my first year here as well as last year. Part of that is recognizing that there is a unique difference between equality and equity. Sometimes I think we all like to look at things as everything being equal, and if you can look at the visual on the left, you can see that in this case there's a physical difference. And so if we were to provide them all the same or equal leg up, as you can see in this case, some of our kids are excluded from the opportunity of seeing the full picture. When you're looking at equity, it means that sometimes we do things differently for some as compared to others, not so that we can give an advantage to others, but we want all of our people to get to their highest ideal, or to be as successful as possible academically and in life in general. And so we're going to be talking about these issues by and large, and we're going to start the conversation this fall. That means we're going to be looking to develop our committee this fall. Our advisory committee will be helping us to look at various curriculums and trainings and the things that's necessary to address some of the concerns that our students are feeling and sharing with us, or sharing with their parents who are sharing it with me, and also equipping our staff so that they are better prepared, because we know their heart is in the right place. These two gentlemen who approached me, I think, were very honest, and they spoke to a very touching issue where a teacher was trying to help a student, but it created other problems and other students didn't understand. And staff members didn't really know how to address that. And so we need to equip our staff members so that they can equip our students with issues of recognizing the biases that we may hold and how that may impact people, and doing the best we can to create equity for all. So with that, we are a little long, but we are open for questions now.
All right, Dr. Martin, let me answer some of the ones that are really quickly answered. So the question is about BYOD at CHS. Will that be moving to 100% digital learning? And the response was just that the students will have access to a device at all times. There's still going to be a choice whether students' best pathway is fully online, partially online, or in a face-to-face, blended environment as we talked about this evening. How will things be changed or reevaluated for in-person and remote restrictions throughout the year? And if so, how often? And the restrictions are really going to be determined by the phases of the Michigan Safe Start plan. So that is would not be coming directly from the school. Next question. If you choose to do in-person learning, but then find out there's a problem, can we switch? And we've kind of had questions at both, like if I don't want to send my student to school, will there be an online, can we switch back and forth? And I think the general recommendation and consensus will be at the semester that those changes would be allowable, but to be doing them interchangeably, intermittently throughout the entire year would be very difficult logistically and for students and teachers and families, et cetera. So we are looking at an option at the semester both ways if you start out online and want to go back face-to-face, or the other way as well. I already answered that. Next question is around, I will give this one to you, Dr. Martin. It is around, as parents, if we're required to provide certain N95 masks or additional cleaning supplies or items that are harder to find, how will this be communicated? And will masks be provided for students each day? What kind? Do students need to bring their own, et cetera?
So let me speak to that. We are going to ask parents to provide masks. However, we have already purchased a healthy number of masks, and I've just authorized that we're going to be getting more masks. The masks that we will be giving will be disposable. If you have a homemade mask, if you buy a mask from a store, there is recommendations on how often you should have that mask washed. So the answer is both. We encourage families or students, if you have a mask that you want to send with your child, we encourage you to do so. If a child comes to school and they forget their mask or what have you, we'll make sure that we have masks available for all of our students as well as our staff.
Just a comment, someone's glad to hear that the district is considering social emotional aspects. And I just wanted to point out that this was a part of our spring plan, but we are making improvements to address our larger systems and processes if we had to pivot online to be more intentional in those efforts. So thank you for that. The next question is around, will hotspots be available again for those that do not have reliable internet? The answer is yes, that will be a coordinated effort as well. Can K-8 students bring their own Chromebook? I wrote down details are still being discussed on this option. There's no definitive answer yet, but that has been in the discussion about what we would do in terms of communicating technology use and what that looks like at the K-8 level. What about moving funds received from millages that passed to cover shortage for funds for the schools?
Not legally allowable. The only funds that is flexible is when we had the enhancement millage. If you recall, our enhancement millage, we could use that to support classroom teachers, i.e. pay for teachers. But we chose to look at enhancement as what are things that are not legally required, but we understand is best practice. So that unfortunately does look at some of our support staff to deal with the social emotional needs of our students, counselors. We added, I think, some other positions to better support that. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to look at cutting back some of those services and supports because we're going to have to use that to support more of our core instructional programming. And so again, right now today, I'm not able to say with a definite answer what that will be. It's a daily discussion and there's a lot of logistics to work through, but we will have that worked out before the end of this month. But anything related to the bond, anything related to the operational millage. The operational millage is our general money. The bond, we can't. The enhancement millage, those are some of the things that we've invested in, and unfortunately, we're probably going to have to take some of those things back out.
What is the potential of switching seasons? I think Daryl talked about that. The MHSA guidance will be coming out on July 20th, announcing if this will happen, so that it's being
Yes.
an if discussion, correct?
That is a if discussion. As soon as we find out, I'm pretty sure you will hear from the high school or the high school athletic department on the impact of what that is. So if it happens on the 20th, I imagine by the 21st, you'll start to receive some communication on that.
Will there be a summary of options parents have for going into next year at each school level? Yes, we're hoping to have this be solidified following our July board meeting. So yes, information would be coming out. How are we addressing our K-12 special education programs? Will they have the same safety procedures? Yes, we're required to work toward meeting those needs as well, whether we're face-to-face or virtually.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I just want to say, I know, like, we want to know. I've never, this is my 23rd, 24th year in public education. I've never entered a year with so much uncertainty, but that's the same across the entire state and across the country. Do realize that we still have about 8 weeks before school gets started, and this is not the summer where we can take a break, unfortunately. We're constantly working around the clock and on the weekends. So do understand that we're trying to give you some good information today, but you're going to continue to receive more information over the duration of the summer. So I would say keep checking for updates from myself, from your building administrators, as well as other opportunities such as this.
Question came up about what specifically has been improved in the online plan since spring. There were several things listed off the top of our head: improved collaboration and consistency in curriculum across grade levels. So departments and other courses, this really, I don't want to say forced, but there was a need to collaborate across, all third grade classrooms as we moved online more intentionally. And that is continuing throughout the summer with some summer work. Also the ability with teachers, also the ability to differentiate and provide instruction and support at a level appropriate for each student. So interventions and rigor, so on both ends. And then the ability to quickly pivot based on whatever the current status is of the state's phase. Next question came up about, I already answered that one.
And as we speak to our survey results, I think it's important to identify that I got a chance to see the county level survey results. It was almost a mirror reflection of what we saw in Caledonia. People by and large said we want school to return in the fall, but people also acknowledged that online is the safest. And you can't be more divergent in those two extremes, but that was basically district by district. That was the mindset that came out in the survey results, that came out at the county, it came out in our school community. And ironically, we saw some state level survey data that said the same thing. People want school to return as normal, but people also want safety. And so for us, we wanted to focus on those two.
Next question is, it seems like we may have to jump back and forth in person to virtual. We're hoping not, but yes, that is a distinct possibility. Obviously disrupting quality routine and education. And so the question came up about looking at homeschool. And we want to just say that under the Caledonia Community Schools, we are going to have an online option of course and curriculum for families wanting to homeschool with an on-site mentor person in the district to help support families if that is a choice. That can be, again, through the Cal Schools as an option. Next question is coming up is about, are the schools going to be allowed some discretion at the local level as it pertains to guidelines of the stages?
No. If we're in phase 4, we don't have discretion. So I know one of the questions is wearing a mask or not. If you're 6 through 12, wearing a mask is not an option. We have to follow the executive order. If there is a legitimate health reason where a person wouldn't wear a mask, then we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. For grades lower than that, we realize that is a different situation. I believe Ms. Hogeson spoke to that. But we don't have discretion, honestly, until we get to stage 5 or 6. And so that's why I am adamantly encouraging our staff members to social distance when we are in the buildings here over the summer. I'm adamantly encouraging my staff members to wear a mask because we want to do our part. And I honestly know that we have some beloved teachers and staff members who are dealing with health issues, and they're very concerned about being able to come back in a healthy environment. So with that, we are encouraging everyone to do their part and help us so that we can all return to school in the fall. Because if we return in phase 4, we're going to be happy to see our students and our staff return any way we can get them. But quite honestly, it's much more limiting versus if we take this serious and we can, as a region, go to phase 5 or 6, where we have a lot less restrictions and a little bit more discretion on what we can do.
Dr. Martin, questions about the equity committee, about member selection and how students would get involved?
Yes, so I'm going to work with the high school administration and possibly even middle school to talk to how we might identify some students to help us as advisory committee. I know at the high school level, we do have some committees that kind of in various ways, or student groups that touch on this issue, but I'm going to be looking for a few students along with some community members or parents. And so I don't want the group to be extremely large, but I do want to make sure that we as an administrative team don't have unnecessary blinders or our own bias that may limit the concerns that our students and our parents are telling us, and some of our teachers are telling us, and that will help us. And so look for more information after, shortly after, either just shortly before or shortly after the start of the school year as we form this committee. As far as for our teachers, we will provide some initial surface level training when we get back preparing for this fall, but as far as trying to develop a multi-year approach to how we're going to deal with this, we'll be getting some information about how to get on the committee if you're interested, and then who's on the committee, and we'll take that a little bit later. But right now, we have to take care of the first thing, and the first thing is making sure that we're able to get school started in the fall. And so we have a lot on our plate, but this is just as important, and as we either just before or just after the start of school, we'll start to get into that committee work.
One of the comments was learning more about the phase 4 plan, so I don't know if you want to give access to that. And the second part of this is if students will be in school at the same time or hybrid. I know you probably want to talk about if hybrid, what would be the plan?
So we do have a plan for hybrid, quite honestly. That plan I don't want to get into because our goal is not to do the hybrid program plan, but if we are required to do so through direction of the state, then we do have a hybrid program that we will roll out. But one of the things that we're asking people to realize is that we're being asked to jump into an area that no one across the country has done. So we're all figuring this out. And I don't want to dilute our focus in trying to have 3 high quality programs. We're really trying to focus on the top 2. We do have a hybrid program that we've worked through, but we only plan on implementing that if we're required to do so. And so if we're in phase 1, 2, or 3, the hybrid is off the table because we can't come to school. In phase 4, 5, or 6, hybrid is not required at all. They're saying that you can come to school, but you just have different levels of restrictions based on the phase we're in. So at that, and based on the survey results that we saw from our parents, overwhelmingly, in terms of quality, hybrid was seen as second to in face-to-face. In terms of safety, hybrid was seen as, I believe, third. We will provide later this week a copy of the survey results online. We will put a copy of the governor's executive order online for those who want to read it, or you can go to the state website and see that, and information about the various phases. we'll put that on our district website later this week.
Dr. Martin, is the school calendar remaining the same? Would there be any opportunity that it might not be the same time frame as currently posted?
So right now, today, the school calendar as currently posted will remain the same. Given what could happen over the course of 8 weeks, that could change. So if that does change, we will let everyone know. But right now, that school calendar is set. I don't anticipate it changing. But depending on how COVID-19 progresses, depending on what we hear from our county officials or our state officials, there is a possibility, I think it's slim, but there's a possibility that that could change. But right now, I would plan on that school calendar as is. And I know we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to extend for another 15 minutes. Normally we will be off, but just with the number of questions, and I still see we have a lot of people there, I want to try to answer as many as possible, but I'm going to put a hard stop of another 15 minutes. That'll be 8 o'clock exactly.
Will there be limits on the number of students in each classroom? How will we handle the crowded hallways during passing times in the high and middle school? I would say that's been part of our roadmap planning conversations and guidance from the state.
So we have contractual guidelines that we follow. The state hasn't put a limit on it, but they have put some things in place about trying to social distance to the best degree possible within our school facility and within our classroom. One of the unique challenges that we have at the same time where they're saying social distance and do all of these creative things that's going to cost more money, we also have the challenge of they're also saying that unless we receive another stimulus package of a sizable amount from the federal government, we're going to have to take a $650 per student reduction. That type of reduction is going to possibly challenge our ability to make the class sizes any smaller than what they are. And if we have to reduce staff, that's a possibility that in some cases we could see increase in class size, which is not something we want to do. It's not what we're advocating for. But we have to live within the parameters of financially where we are. And we realize that a lot of our families are under these same parameters. People are losing their jobs, their businesses, and this is what education is dealing with. I do believe that we'll get some federal stimulus, but unfortunately for us, as of July 1, those people, some of our staff members, their raise kicked in July 1. They have already agreed to not take anything, or some of us have taken a reduction. Others, their raises kick in August 1. And so we have to put our reductions in place before that, because anything that we spend beyond our budget is eroding our funds at a faster rate. So there's just so many unknowns, and we are literally getting more information week by week.
Day by day. Some days.
Day by day, and so that we don't present it in a schizophrenic fashion, I've made the choice to consciously every week or every couple weeks bring out a number of issues that are coming up and that we're able to work through and bring with clarity. And we'll continue to do that until we start school in the fall.
Can links to the state guidelines be provided for each level? We did put that in the chat window. We'll put it in the FAQ document, but if you Google Michigan Safe Schools Roadmap, you should be able to find it as well. Next question is, phases are determined by county and not district, correct? Phases
Yes.
are determined by the state, not county or district.
Yeah, and it's not just county, but it's kind of a region of county. So Kent County is in a region, so, and it is determined by region. So all of Kent County is in this particular region.
Will schools be allowed to have an open house?
That question we don't know at this point. It's possible if we do have an open house, it will have to operate differently. We realize that some of our new families, our new students will want to get in there to see what the schools look like. But if so, that information will be coming out later, and we will be very adamant and very stringent on how that works, because we want to do everything possible to get our kids back this fall.
How can the community advocate for this stimulus money from the federal government?
So previously we put out some information, I believe, to our staff. I want to think that we put it out to our families. If not, we can put that on our website or send some information out. But basically, there's two things. Contact our local legislators and ask for them to advocate to our federal legislators, or contact our federal legislators who represent our area.
Can we find some clear masks for teachers? Just thinking it would be so much better to be able to see the teachers' faces. We talked about that today.
Yes, we did. So for teachers, we are working on some clear masks, particularly for teachers, or even some clear face guards, because we understand for language acquisition that it's important for our students to maybe see the formation of words and sounds from teachers. So we don't have them yet. We have masks for students and staff, but not the clear ones, and we are working towards that. But again, we encourage people, if you have it and you want to bring it, bring your own. Just like bring your own device, you can bring your own mask.
Question is about, will buses run as normal?
We're not sure about that yet. I anticipate that it won't be radically different. This is one of the challenges with hybrid. We can make a hybrid work from an instructional standpoint, but from a logistical standpoint, it is a complete nightmare because you can only bring so many kids in at a certain time. You would have to change your day, your hours. You would have to significantly elevate the cost of your transportation. So we don't know. I anticipate if we return to school in the fall, our busing should not have dramatic changes that you wouldn't see in any other year, but for the requirement that everyone, bus driver and students, wear a mask on the bus unless they are medically incapable of doing so, and that we have hand sanitizers for students as they enter the bus so that we can cut down on the spread.
This is just clarifying confusion with the slide that said minus 650 versus minus 175 at the end. It still said a shortfall of 650.
Let me go back to that. That could just be a typo on our part. Oh, at the end, I know exactly what you're talking about. The first part of this, A, B, and C, this is all about the 1920 school year. So for us, our school year officially in a financial sense, we have to close out our financial books on June 30th, which has been done. Our state has told us that they don't have the capacity to make up the shortfall for this fall. And so if you think back to what I said originally, they said that because of COVID-19, the impact and the timing is so deep that it will impact the school funding for 2, possibly 3 years. And so what they were looking at is a negative 650 for the 1920 year. So even though it happened towards the end of the school year, they were going to take away our funding. We still get funding in June and July so that we're able to pay our teachers and our staff through the summer. They were going to cut our funding in June and July. They have solved that problem for us, but they're saying that they do not have the problem solved for this fall. The state and the federal government, they don't have to have their budget in place until October 1. By that point, we're into the school year, we're paying our staff. So we're gonna be starting the year, unless something happens in between now and the next 8 weeks, with a budget reduction of 650 off of last year's number. So that's why I highlighted in yellow. Last year's numbers have been taken care of. This year's number is still a problem, which is why we are going to be doing some layoffs coming really soon.
Any updates on non-athletic extracurricular activities?
As long as we're in phase 4 or higher, we can do extracurricular activities. Before and after school childcare can go. Obviously, they're going to have similar type of restrictions, So there may be some changes as we get closer. You'll start to get information from your building administrators about maybe some of the specifics of what things will look like. If we drop below phase 4, there will be no school, no athletics, no activities. The better we can do as a community and as a region, the greater our possibility is of getting back to life as normal as soon as possible.
How about the arts, orchestra, choir, theater?
What about them? Is there?
Well, there was another question about marching band camp in the next few weeks at the high school.
I think there's been some information about band camp going out. I think it's going to be done in a locally because the camp that they normally use because of COVID-19 and everything else, it's not deemed as safe to bring kids in that environment and have them in close quarters because that would probably continue to spread. I think they are going to do band camp here locally in a socially distanced fashion. And I think some information has already gone out from the music department. If not, you would need to contact the high school or contact the music teachers.
Question about live streaming lessons each day during class periods for children at home quarantined. I think probably more of what it would be like would be, asynchronous learning, being able to shift that student from the face-to-face to online with support from the teacher in a more robust and personalized way than we had this spring. I don't know about live streaming. That has not come up as an option this time.
Yeah, and then one of the things, I know that's very popular, the concept, and just for the families out there, the challenge for us trying to have things in a synchronized fashion, one, there's some logistical challenges for us, but we do also have some families that if their kids are at home, it was very problematic for them to have kids in multiple age groups, and whether it was devices, and so the asynchronous method seemed to be a little bit flexible because as we were trying to do this, we were hearing from some families saying, because I have to work from home or because I am my child's childcare and I have to do this work, this schedule doesn't work for me, that schedule doesn't work for me. And so the asynchronous model was really the best way that we can accommodate the needs of all families. And so once that video is set, then the families, and some families said it worked great for us because we developed a schedule that we put our kids on to work through this. We know it's not ideal for everyone, but logistically speaking, with the time frame of us putting these things together, that is probably going to be the best model. But Ms. Flynn has spoken about us moving to some better online platforms and training, and I think those things will continue to improve for us because we're using some things that have already been out there and done for years. But there's a training element that we have to go through to get our staff ready for that too.
And all of the logistics questions that people are putting in, so there's multitude of questions around logistics happening this way or recorded sessions or Zoom, all of that is part of the training, and we want to have the teacher voice in that. In addition to the survey that we got from them, we want them to be part of those solutions to improve this. So some of these have not been decided upon yet, because people have been on vacations, et cetera, but that is, we do have a framework with which to get input from teachers and talk about some of those things that are listed here. And again, a multitude of questions related to that. Another question about when will parents have to make a decision about the option?
So we don't know just yet, but we're going to try to put a date out there because that's going to help us determine the implications on staffing, obviously. We want to try to accommodate as many families as we can. And there are some, I can't tell you the number of decisions and pieces on the board that will have to be moved. So look in a few weeks as our committee is still working through some questions for us to be able to say we're asking for our families to let us know and commit to either being back in a face-to-face, if allowed, or being in the online, and what it takes for us to get you set up in that. And that way we can start making the necessary adjustments for that. We don't have that answer today, but it's coming.
Last question, because it's 8 o'clock. Have you considered putting together a community feedback group with logistics as well? Not really sure exactly what that means, but
no, not that we were trying to be insensitive, but just the sheer time frame and the volume of things that we're trying to work through. We're getting a lot of information that is being fed up to us through our teachers, through administrators, through emails or other things in our community. And in a lot of cases, we get some suggestions that are really good. Some sounds good, but they don't understand the logistics already, or how complicated it would be for us to try to pull it off in such a short fashion. And so there's an education component to that if we start to bring a bunch of people from outside the system to talk about the logistics of transportation. It sounds really easy, and I tease my wife all the time because she says, well, why don't you do this? And once I start explaining how this is connected to that, she quickly tells me to be quiet. She doesn't want to hear it. She gets just, but it's a pretty complicated operation that it would take, in order for community members to be very helpful, it would take a lot of explaining, and unfortunately time is not on our side. But it doesn't mean that you can't share your opinion, because quite honestly, we've gotten some opinions that have been shared, and that has turned into logistics that we'll use, honestly.
Yeah, and just again, a couple of questions coming in about the hybrid. You know, hybrid could mean any number of scenarios, which we talked about not being able to logistically feasibly do, which would mean alternating days or half days or 2 days a weekend and 2 days off and 4 days on and 10 days off. And we've looked at other states and other countries and people who are further ahead than we are, than our state. And the reality is that the logistics with family schedules and busing and logistics with teachers and being able to pull this off in 8 weeks is just not a realistic scenario. And to be honest, every hybrid for one family, a 2 day a week would work, and for another family, alternating weeks would work. And we just cannot be all things to everyone. We're trying to provide as many quality, manageable solutions for folks without the challenges of that piece.
I think depending on your district, some districts can do hybrids, but I was on a statewide committee, and I'll make it quick. I heard hybrid options of half day, some in the morning, some afternoon. I heard 2 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and with Wednesday as a cleaning day, and then Thursday, Friday. I heard Monday, Wednesday for one group, Thursday, Friday for another group. I heard 1 week on, 1 week off. I heard 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. The possibilities of the hybrid is endless. And every time a situation came up, and this was with educators across the state, for every good idea, there was a legitimate, realistic problem with the logistics, or what educators, and this was teachers as well as administrators, were saying families, not all families could adjust to those hybrids. So for us, we do have a hybrid plan, quite honestly, but we don't want to put it out there or try to maintain a third option, because we want to focus on doing the best we can, and really these are the two options that, no matter how we looked at the data, came to the top as either the safest or the most desirable. And so we're going to move forward with that, because when you look at the state executive order, nothing required us to do a hybrid. But if we logistically try to manage all three of those, my fear is that we'll do a lot of things and we'll do very few things well. And we want to make sure that in this tough time, that our students and our staff have a experience that is the best that we can make it. And
Dr.
so
Martin, we didn't get quite through all the questions. I think we got through the nuance of most of them. So I will summarize those questions and we'll make those available.
Yes. So what we do for those questions that we couldn't get to, we do kind of summarize. A lot of times questions are repetitive. We'll kind of get the gist of that question, and then we'll put a response on our website. And then I'm not sure today when I'll be back before you having a conversation. Again, every time something comes out, I don't want to run and inundate your inbox with emails or have one of these every day or every week, because literally information is coming out every day and every week. We try to group enough information to give you what you need to take the next step forward. But do understand you're going to get more information about mask and social distancing and what will be required as we get closer to the start of school. Because there could be a shift in the phase. We still have 8 weeks to go before the first day of school. You're going to get more information about the logistics of transportation as we get closer, as you would do in any normal year. You'll get more information about the semester change or courses. I know the high school has already provided information. They're already working through those logistics. So just understand that we will continue to roll out information in a way that we will try to be as timely as possible and not overwhelm or panic people. I want to thank everybody. We had a good number of people participating tonight. And so we look forward to seeing everyone in the fall. Again, I'm going to plead my case. I can tell you I am not a fan of having to wear a mask, but I am probably a big stickler on wearing a mask because I understand the hardships that this put on a lot of our families. And so we want to do our part, and we encourage you to help us do our part as a community to make sure that we can start school in the fall in our district and in our region. We want to ask you to do your part just out of respect for others. I know some of our staff members, either themselves or some of their loved ones in their household, have health compromise conditions. And so I've actually challenged some of my staff members, like, yeah, I know I'm complaining about wearing a mask, but either get away from me or put on a mask. Let's be safe, because I want everyone to return safe and healthy, because we miss our students, we miss our staff. We understand that part of education is the socialization. It's important, and we are also respectful for those who are in a health compromised situation or just don't feel comfortable and you feel like online is for you. We're going to do our part to try to keep you with the Caledonia family for education and give you what you need to have a successful online experience. So thank you. Have a good evening, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.